Welcome into an all-new episode of Panthers on Tap. We are officially the three-man show now with Ricky Range joining the podcast. We had him on last week, but it's officially us three now going forward, our first solo show altogether. Ricky, it's good to have you back. I'm glad we didn't scare you away after one, so that's good to
Yeah,
see.
I took some time in and I really did some deep thinking, Curtis. Bryson's terrific. I really enjoyed, our dynamic, but I really did have to think a little bit about you, Curtis. But I'm going to give it another week, man.
Bryson, how you doing tonight?
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm excited for this trio that we have here and moving forward, the content we're going to put out. So just excited to finally get the ball on the road here and get things rolling.
Yeah, what are you guys drinking tonight, Ricky? I had a buddy who tunes in, friend from back home all the way in Wisconsin, and he's like, "Man, that new guy really showed you guys up with the beers last week." So,
Oh,
he was listening. He was tuned in.
I got more for you tonight, man. So first, I've got two beers because I don't know how long this show is going to go, right? But the Roaring Riot Lager is a must for the first week. Shout out to the Roaring Riot. Then I've got this Heist Brewery Festbach because I don't know about where y'all are right now, but it is a beautiful 62, 63 degrees in the mornings. I mean, it just feels like football out there. So I wanted to get that going. But the special thing that I did open today is this Wavens barrel proof. This is one of 200 bottles, and they hand selected it when they went to the distillery, and they named it unicorn juice because they kept walking past this barrel and were just shocked about how good it was. And it's 116 proof. So it's a big, heavy guy, but it tastes absolutely fantastic. So I thought that was appropriate for the occasion.
Yeah, that'll put hair on your chest for damn sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Bryson, what are you drinking?
Yeah, well, we'll start with obviously the koozie here, the Body Show koozie.
It's a good show.
A great show. I've heard good things about it. So my first beer is called Thank You for Existing. I figured it was appropriate for adding Ricky and then also football. Thank you for existing football because it gives me purpose in life, even though we cheer for a team that hasn't really been great lately. So it's a Kolsch style ale. Curtis, I was telling you a little bit about it before we got on. It's so good. I think you'd like it a lot. And then I do have another beer as well for dessert. A beer called Fuzzy Bottoms. It is a Carolina peach wit beer, and it has fresh Carolina peaches and a touch of oat smoked wheat.
Oh, that sounds damn good.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm locked in tonight.
Yeah,
I'm not locked in, guys. I'm not. I'm still drinking
Budweiser.
Sam Adams. I got one of these left. And then I had some twisted teas that I had for when we hung out this past weekend, Bryson. So I'm still working on those.
It's like that scene in Wolf of Wall Street when he's sitting there across from Matthew McConaughey and he's like, "Man, you got to get those numbers up. Like these are rookie numbers, Curtis. Like I need you to commit, man. We are the Panthers on Tap crew. Get something on tap, brother. Like what are we doing?"
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But let's get into tonight. Let's talk. And we'll start with some of the bigger news. I don't know if you'd call it that, but that happened recent as of late. And it was a guy that Dan Morgan had brought in this past offseason from the Jaguars, and the Panthers in a very thin edge rushing room have released K'Lavon Chaisson. So I just kind of wanted to get your guys' takes on that. Bryson, if you want to start, just overall sentiment with the decision and what you thought of his brief offseason here in Carolina.
Yeah, brief for sure. I think, unfortunately, for Chaisson's case, he could not make it in a room that lacks talent. I think that might say more about him than anything, but this is a room that lacks talent and depth, and for them to move on from him before week one after training camp is over, I think it's a little bit of a question mark timing-wise for me. I thought Chaisson had a good camp early on. I think when we were there, Curtis, and the first couple of weeks of training camp, there were some reports that Chason was disruptive in the backfield. He was the first one to get to Bryce to make him throw the ball quickly or whatever it was. And, I think the only video I saw of him on the internet was him like catching that tennis ball with his hands, like training wise. So, I mean, I had hopes that maybe, he could turn around and be that first round pick that he was with that. Because I remember him coming out of LSU. I was pretty high on him and thought he was going to be a good player in this league. So, signing him low risk. Maybe he turns his career around in Carolina. I know we've been hoping for that a lot lately with different signings across the past couple of years. But, in a room that needed talent, I was hoping that, he could be a light. And unfortunately, he was not. And he did not get to see any playing time for this team in 2024. So that was frustrating for me. But ultimately, obviously, the team felt that other players in this room needed the playing time. And then they made the decision to let him go. So it was surprising, but I don't know necessarily if the room got worse. I'll say that.
Yeah, I just want to shout out the chat. Made for More. I know he's tuned in a couple times. Appreciate the support. He says, "What's up?" to us. And Zach Griffin always has tuned in as well. He's a returner, so we appreciate it.
What's up, fellas?
Who's ready to get hurt again? I don't know what reference. Not sure what that's in reference to. Does anyone know what that's in reference
Probably
to?
the season upcoming.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, fair.
And it's
fair.
an Office clip. Michael Scott, he says, "I'm definitely ready to be hurt again." So I got you on that reference. As a bow body, I've got to know the offense references, right? Like that's kind of my thing.
Oh
yeah, you're slacking if you. I actually have. I think I've seen maybe one season of that show.
I'm gonna have to whip you into shape on so many things here, Curtis. Like a boot camp.
Chason, Ricky, what were your thoughts on his brief stint?
Do you want to know what I think about K'Lavon Chason? Not much. And that's not trying to be overly disrespectful, but I didn't have any expectations on him making the 53-man roster. Not even contributing, not as a revival for his career. I genuinely just did not see anything out of the player that made me think that he would be a player here. I was watching Good Morning Football today, and Kyle Brandt was talking about the segment that they used to do with Nate Burleson, where he would come on. He's like, "Hey, the only person that can beat Pat Mahomes is Pat Mahomes." And like, he would just kind of give a sly smirk, and everyone thought it was the greatest thing in the world. The only person that could get in his own or could get in K'Lavon Chason's way here in Carolina with this edge room is K'Lavon Chason. Like, if you couldn't carve out some sort of role here on defense, and he was talking, Dave Canales talked about wanting a dynamic pass rushing threat off the edge, and they kept DJ Johnson. So what he is saying is that DJ Johnson and his pass move, is more dynamic than anything K'Lavon Chason brought to the table. He said that he carved out a nice role on special teams. Our special teams was one of our worst units during the preseason, right? So like, there just wasn't value there. I hope that he gets another shot if he wants to keep playing football, because I never want to see somebody's career end at an early age like that. But for us, the best thing that we could have right now is open runway for Iku Leota and Jamie Sheriff, in my opinion, to get more burn and find out what some of these young kids can do.
Yeah, I hated to take this approach when it got released, but I almost took a victory lap because I hated this signing in March. Carolina continues to try to take, and someone made a good point. I don't even know if you want to call him a has-been, because I don't think he was ever a Ben. He was never around for the Jaguars. He was a bust from the get-go. I think 4 sacks in a couple years. And Carolina tried to bring him over here to revitalize his career like they do a lot of guys in Jacksonville, and it just didn't pan out. And there were folks, I maybe misrepresented my tweet a little bit, and maybe shouldn't have said most fans, but there were a few fans out there that liked this decision when they signed him, and thought he was going to be the next best thing, and he doesn't even make the roster. And this kind of goes back. I don't mean to keep going down this rabbit hole of, I think this is another bad signing by Dan Morgan for this edge room. This was the Clowney signing, great and all, but this is now the second guy next to Wanham, who got hurt, and you can't really control that. But they knew the injury they were getting into. They didn't know it was going to relapse again and take a step back. But they knew they were signing a guy who was hurt, and then they signed this guy who was a flyer, somewhat of a dart throw, and it didn't work out. It sounds like it was a money move, and it looks like they saved, I think, like $2 million in cap from it. And he might be back on practice squad, maybe. So we'll, keep an eye on that possibly moving forward. But yeah, I think, Canales said today, like, they were looking for a guy to take over that other spot, and he just didn't do it. Like, he would have maybe been an all right special teams guy, but that's not what they were looking for. They needed someone to take over that room, and no one really has. I don't even like DJ Johnson hasn't, and Leota I don't think gets enough opportunity. And I know Ricky's a big EQ Leota guy.
Yeah. The other thing that I'll say too, if I can just toss one last thought on that out there, is I did think that the timing was possibly mismanaged or curious at best, right? I thought that there was an opportunity that if he didn't wow you during training camp, which he wasn't there for much of it, right? Remember, he wasn't there for voluntaries, I believe. I believe he was catching tennis balls somewhere down south. And then in training camp, he didn't start because he was getting up to his conditioning, right? Like, he took a little bit of a ramp up period. If you knew, and you probably had to have some sort of inclination, if you knew that he wasn't making an impact and you didn't really want to carry him on that, the salary cap ramification with his $2 million cap hit, you had an opportunity there with the big cut day to bring in somebody else and get a look at somebody else and get first dibs. Now, KJ Henry maybe wasn't a scheme fit here. Yeah. Right. Maybe he wasn't a scheme fit here, but was Kalavon Chason a scheme fit? Like, he can't set the edge. He doesn't pass rush. Like, what scheme does he fit? Right. So I did think that timing was possibly mismanaged, but the argument that I saw on Twitter especially was that they wanted to see him compete against the new waiver claims. Man, if you're trying to figure out if this guy makes it by competing with the guys that were cut from another team that you had to pick up first because you were the worst team, I just think you already had your answer. So you could have got to look at somebody else. But neither here nor there. If he makes the practice squad, I'll hope that he turns a corner there and can contribute. But if he doesn't, Godspeed to Kalavon Chason.
Well, yeah, and I think the timing, though, and the way I saw it, and I think Mike K kind of explained this, was they had a deadline to meet with money as far as his contract was concerned, and that's kind of why it was so late. But I agree with you. I think they missed an opportunity to bring in Henry. Hell, see what you got in him. If you're cutting this guy, why the hell waste your time with it and get rid of him? So I think that was kind of a wasted move on their part because, that guy had some potential, and he's a much younger talent than what I know Chason is in this league, 4 or 5 years already. But man, that edge room it's slim pickings. Yeah. It's concerning, and we'll talk about it later when we get into the actual defense and previewing this matchup versus the Saints. But man, that room, and I get it. Carolina really hasn't had a lot aside of Brian Burns in the past, but can you expect DJ Johnson to get 5-6 sacks this year? Can you expect Leota? I think Leota could get there. I do. I think that guy has some talent to him, and I think he just needs the opportunity. And we saw it in preseason, in flashes of it last year.
Yeah.
But I'm not counting on that guy every single down opposite Clowney. Yeah. I think he's a rotational dude who can, flash at points, and it sucks. It really does, because that Wanham injury is killing them right now in that room. But we do have some breaking news. I just want to mention this because it just came in, and I know none of this was planned, but 2 of the 3 charges were dismissed against the ex-Panthers VP, Adrian Wilson. I think he had I would think it was domestic. I don't want to misspeak. Was it DV charges?
Yeah. Yep.
So those just got dropped. I know Carolina obviously parted ways with him. But just wanted to throw that out there.
And there were some mental health aspects in that too. That were difficult when you heard like the details behind that. So really, man, like if he got him dropped, if there's some sort of plea deal or something like that he's agreed to if it's something outside of actual punishment, then I hope that he gets help on that, because that was a scary sounding situation, man.
Let's move forward. Totally shifting gears here. Well, let's start with team captains, and then we will get into our game preview. We got a lot to talk about. Ricky he's got a great segment coming up for you guys, so stick around for that. But let's talk about team captains. Those got announced today. And I will bring this graphic up. Here we go. So the 4, as you guys can see, Bryce Young, Derek Brown, Shaq Thompson, Sam Franklin. I feel like this is a little bit smaller of a number than in years past as far as captains are concerned. But Ricky, just your overall thoughts, any surprises for you, or did you kind of expect this?
Well, when you hear Canales, the way that he spoke about it, right, and the way that he kind of broke down how it all came about, I love what it is. You know, Bryce Young is a unanimous choice as captain in his second year leading the team. Derek Brown, we know, was the best player on the football team last year and possibly the year before. Shaq Thompson is the spiritual and emotional leader, especially with Frankie Louvu gone. He is the epitome of keep pounding, right? The guy's coming back from a serious injury. And from all accounts by reporters, from what we've seen in person in camp, he looks like he's got everything back to him. Like, he looks like Shaq to me, just the way he's moving out there. Sam Franklin, again, man, you're talking about the culture, the heart, the pulse of the team. Even with him injured, they said, they'll have rotational guys. And that 5th captain spot, they will have a rotating captain on a week-by-week basis. What I love about that, we just talked about guys like Iku Leota, right? Iku Leota's strength is his motor and his effort and his determination. You get a guy like that if he comes out, hell, maybe week 1 against these Saints, right? We'll talk about why I think he has a good chance there. But he comes out and he shows up big time against the Saints, and he might get rewarded with a captain the second week. Trevin Wallace, they talk about wanting it to be special teams. If he gets down there and he makes a great impact as a gunner on special teams, he may get a captain as a rookie. I love the confidence and the team building that it instills by having that rotational captain. I'm just really happy to see Bryce being unanimously voted. He's got that locker room. He's got his teammates. The coaches believe in him. Man, I'm just jacked up about that, to be completely honest.
I am too. I was shocked. I thought he was a captain last year. I heard that in the presser today. I'm like, I swear he was a captain. But yeah, I agree. I think that's great, and it shows, his leadership is growing within that locker room, which is great to see. Because there was always, Bryce is this kind of timid, lets his playing speak for himself type guy, and I definitely think you've seen that growth this year. He seems a little bit more vocal, and it doesn't have to be bombastic or whatever the word you want to use, like Cam Newton was in that locker room, but he shows it in little ways, I think. And we saw flashes of that last year. I want to say it was maybe the Houston game where he was, pulling guys to the sideline and saying, I think it was the offensive line group, like, we need to step it up here. We need to get our asses together. And, they ended up winning that game, one of the very few that they had. But you kind of seen that in spurts last year. So I agree. I think that was big. I think it's huge for Sam Franklin. For a guy who has, got hurt, and this team and the players think so highly of him, even though he has been sidelined, he's out with a pretty serious injury. I think that speaks volumes to just the character of that guy too. Bryson, any observations here with the captains?
Not really too much additional to add. I mean, I agree with you guys that I thought it was awesome to see that Bryce Young was unanimously voted team captain. I thought that was sweet. And then obviously with Sam Franklin, same thing with you, Curtis. I thought it was cool. He's injured and still getting that spot. It does sound like he's going to be back at some point this year. So that's good news. And, I like Sam Franklin a lot, especially, he's one of the few guys on this team that's going to stand on the opponent's sideline and talk shit and pregame be talking shit to the other team. And he's not afraid of that smoke. We'll just put it that way. And I think that Dave Canales likes that. There's not a whole lot that Dave Canales has done up to this point that I haven't really liked. And keeping the captain smaller than years past, and just pretty much everything he's handled up to this point, I've liked. So I like the players that were selected, the players voted for him. I think their plan was to go with only one on defense, but I think what I heard was that the voting was very close between Derek Brown and Shaq Thompson, so they made 2. I just like the way he's handling things, and I'm hopeful, man. I'm hopeful.
I love the
I love
rotational too, like Ricky
Yeah.
said. Like, I don't know if the team that's like it's new or anything, but it gives guys something to work towards. There's something,
Yep.
hey, I can earn this and I can be the captain for like, I think that, and people love competition. Like that's what these guys are all about.
And lots of guys have that opportunity. Like we could look at a guy like Jamie Robinson, right? Like that's a guy that like you talk about the special teams. Maybe he doesn't see the field much, right? But give him that special teams, especially with Sam Franklin out, somebody's going to pick up that steam, and that builds confidence, man. And then a whole unit can rally around their guy getting that nod. One last thing about Bryce Young being the offensive player, he unseats Taylor Moton, who has been a staple of a captain and who everybody had the highest admiration and respect for. And I believe they still do. It's not a knock on Taylor. It's showing exactly how highly regarded Bryce Young is in there amongst his peers, that he unseated one of the most veteran players and a guy who's starting his 100th consecutive game on Sunday when he starts. That's pretty remarkable, man. Like this second-year kid who had one of the worst statistical rookie seasons in history has the entire support and belief of his teammates. That's pretty cool.
And Mike Hollinger said in the chat, and I looked it up. And I blame the beat reporter on this. Bryce Young was a captain last year. I just looked up the article, Panthers.com. Shaq Thompson, Brian Burns, Taylor Moton, Bryce Young, Adam Thielen, and Johnny Hecker were all captains last year.
He was a captain all year. I didn't know that. I thought that he did not start the year out as a captain. Interesting.
So, and look, I mean, that kind of goes to show, like Frank Reich had what? I think that's 6 guys. So that Carolina's going with 3, 4th as a rotational. So yeah, I think it's good. And I think, there's a lot of things that I think a lot of people would agree with, that I think a lot of us just like in what Canales is doing with this team. But let's dive into it. Ricky, I'm going to let you take this next segment. You take the reins on this. There's the
is that a
little
pun intended? Yeah, there you go. All right.
Well, you can kick us off here. We're going to kind of get into our preview. I just want to kind of tease ahead. We do got some bets to throw out there for you guys, so stay tuned for that a little bit later on in the episode. But Ricky, take it away.
You got the slides up, Curtis?
Yeah,
there we go. All right. So for this segment, I thought like the way that I like to do a pregame warm up, right? When I'm looking into matchups that could be favorable and what we want to hone in on as fans watching, especially from the broadcast, is the statistics that back up what you're seeing. So we'll start with the Panthers. Panthers offense. Now, look, little caveat on this, right? This is a 2023 statistics because no 2024 games have been played. So this is Frank Reich and Thomas Brown's offensive system. This is DJ Chark. This is Hayden Hurst. You know what I mean? Like, this is a different team. I get it. These are the 9th and 10th depth chart offensive guards. But you can still look at it because we do have some players that are coming back. And it's nice to look at it in contrast as well. We were second to last in points per game. That's got to be one of the first things that we see change with this Canales offense, right? Like, you have got to generate some points. Yards per game, bottom of the barrel. Pass yards per game, bottom of the barrel. Rushing yards per game, I thought was interesting. And this is why I'm a fan of Chuba this Sunday as well. And by the way, I've been workshopping this nickname for Chuba. So can y'all see if we can gain some steam? Big League Chew. I love it. I think that it's really good. He could chew off chunks of yardage. You know what I mean? Like,
I saw that tweet a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, that's a damn good name.
Yeah, see?
I like that.
So if we're going to go on a pun run here, let's make sure we throw in some Chuba puns as well. But 104 rushing yards per game. And that's with a zone blocking scheme where the personnel that we had wasn't even that good to it. And there's deeper statistics that will back up Chuba's actual performance, not just that rushing offensive line. 4.2 pass yards per play. That was last in the league. 4 rushing yards per play, 23rd. Here's the interesting thing. We ran the 10th most plays per game last year. And it's because we were behind for so long and teams scored relatively easy on us, right? So we played a lot of catch up in games. But 59% of the time we were throwing the ball. That's 8th most in the league. Again, that's from playing behind. but it also shows you that this was not a balanced, complementary offense. So looking forward, those are things that I want to look for, right? I want to see that we invested in Robert Hunt. We invested in Damian Lewis. Icky, we know, is a run-blocking menace. I want to see those rushing numbers go up, especially with Canales talk about how stubborn he's going to be. You can move. And do you guys have anything on this that sticks out to you?
I did. I
just
wanted
based
to
on
chime in on
2023?
this. I want to chime in on this because I think it's crazy to even think about.
Mhm.
And it came to my mind when you were mentioning it. The rushing yards per game, Carolina was 20th. We know Chuba had a pretty solid year. And Carolina obviously had a turnstile at the guard position and really across the entire offensive line. What's crazy to me is that the Bucs were lower than the Panthers in rush yards per game with Dave Canales wanting to pound the shit out of the ball last year. They were 31st in the league at 90.4 yards per game. And we all know, it was a slow start for them. They got into a rut middle of the season and they just ripped off a bunch of wins at the end and ended up making the playoffs. But just something to note as we move forward. That popped into my head immediately. I'm like, holy shit, that's crazy. I can't believe we were in. I can't believe we were 20th. I don't even believe that.
Right.
The offense was just so bad last year that you didn't think anything was remotely even close to the middle as far as statistically. So just think that's interesting.
I love that you point that out because I think that what it shows me too, or what it gives me the belief of, is that Canales isn't starting with the bottom of the barrel run offense here. He's got a running back that can make plays. He's got a running back that can get downhill, one cut, get downhill, and he's going to fight through contact. Then you got Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders had a terrible year, but look, man, he's come in focused. They said that he has shed some weight. He is determined. He's got a chip on his shoulder. You're not looking for him to be your workhorse, the bell cow. You just want him to contribute. And if he could do that, especially on third downs right now while we wait for Jonathan Brooks, I just don't know that we're going to see that slow start that everyone anticipates from the rush game just because Rashad White and that makeshift offensive line in Tampa got off to a slow start. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they got there's two premier guards too. Go ahead, Bryce.
Right.
Yeah, and I was going to say that the thing that sticks out to me is well, first of all, my God, just bringing back memories of how bad this offense was last year. But this is a team that ran the 10th most plays, passed the ball the 8th most in the league, and they averaged the least amount of yards per game. I mean, that is just disgusting. It doesn't make sense. Like, that doesn't seem like it's like there's got to be an error somewhere. But there's not. It's just this team could not function as an offense, and I think that that started with Frank Reich and in his incompetency with changing the offenses so many times that we've had reports from this offseason and taking play calling, giving it up, and so forth. So here's to new beginnings, man, because good Lord, I cannot watch that again.
Yeah, I'll drink to that.
And we appreciate the chat chiming in. Cannon, he's jumping the gun on our predictions later. He's got 21-17 Panthers.
Let's go, Cannon.
We'll talk about that as we get moving forward here. So we appreciate you guys chatting it up. Keep it coming. If you got questions for us, throw them at us. We'll answer them as we go on. But let's continue on here with the deep keys of the offense. Go ahead, Ricky.
So, and again, this is what I was talking about with Chuba. We had 48 rushes, I believe is what that says. I can barely see the screen, but 48 rushes of 10 plus yards. That was 15th in the league. So we're right league average essentially for explosive runs, right? That tells you also Chuba Hubbard, he's not elusive, man. He's not a dancer, but he will find the hole and he will get downhill in a hurry. That's what you want, man, especially when you got these big hog mollies now opening up these lanes for Chuba. I love that. The interesting thing is the statistic right underneath it, the 2 yards before contact per attempt. We were 29th in the league, less than a yard that he got before contact per attempt. But he was 3 yards after contact per attempt for 8th best in the league. Chuba Hubbard is a quality running back who played behind a bad offensive line with a bad passing attack and a bad offensive coaching staff. Like, think of all of the cards dealt or stacked against this guy, and he still managed to get a very productive season, in my opinion, with all of those situations around him. Another thing that I didn't put on here is they also ran the ball 55.1% of the time with inside the tackles. That was fourth most in the league. So like they were very stubborn about what they were doing. The outside zone that I'm anticipating seeing more of from Dave Canales, I think is going to fit much more with the personnel we have, because you can have Robert Hunt, who is very athletic for a man his size. You can have him on those pulls that you need to succeed. Austin Corbett can get out in space as a lead blocker. Those are all things that we didn't have last year. So I think that you can open up that rushing attack a whole lot more than what we saw. The sacks, we know that we had a barrel of sacks last year on 269 quarterback pressures. The thing I need to see from Bryce Young is that second statistic there. 10% quarterback sack rate, 30th in the league. Some of that is on Bryce. He has got to get rid of the ball quicker, and that's what that 2.7 second premise is, right? There was a terrific article today by the Panthers staff writer, Cassidy Hill.
Outstanding
Stuff. Like, if you haven't read that article, literally, like, once you're done watching our show, and you're going to stay for the whole thing because it's a great show, once you're done here, take the last couple sips of your beer and go read that article, because it is outstanding. We were 15.7% of the time we called play action. That was 30th in the league. Luckily, the team that we play, the Saints, were even worse than that. But if you're going to be stubborn about a rush offense and you want to ground and pound and play complementary so that you can generate downfield shots, you're going to have to call play actions, and you're going to have success on the ground. So I anticipate seeing that number go up a good deal with this offense and Bryce Young, because that's also one of his strong suits. The team yardage after catch, do I have to even tell anyone about how poor we were making something happen with our playmakers? And I say playmakers because I don't know what else to call them, right? What was it, Cat Williams, where he had that stand-up where he's like, I only call you bitches because I don't know your names individually. I call them playmakers because, like, there's nothing else that I could really say about it. But we were the only team in the league that had a total negative figure for yards after catch over expectancy, which means that no matter what the situation was once they got the ball, they anticipated them at least being able to, like, fall forward, right? Like, you're going to be able to do something positive with it. Only team in the league with negative yardage. The closest team, I believe, was the Raiders or the Cardinals with 77 plus yardage, which is also terrible when you break it down from 17 games, but at least they had it, right? We went out and we added Deontay Johnson. We went out and we added Xavier Legette. Jonathan Mingo has taken a step. Jatavion Sanders is a bowling ball who can catch the ball. You really look at what they did with this offense, man, and it's cohesive and it makes sense to me. So those are my keys. Do you guys see anything there that you're just like, wow, that is alarming?
The one you mentioned to end, like, I think that's crazier than hell. And I had a question. Bryson, go ahead, and then I'll ask you guys it.
No, I mean, I was going to say, for some reason that doesn't surprise me, because, you know, as all of us last year watched every game, the yards after catch was just not there at all. If they catch the ball in the first place, you know, they weren't getting that yak. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever that we're last in yak, and then, you know, the over expected we are negative because nothing was happening after the ball was caught. But one thing, I do have a question for you, Ricky, the 10% quarterback sack rate. So were those sacks attributed to Bryce Young?
Well, no, not that. That whole thing isn't just attributed to Bryce Young, but that's how many times pressures turned into a sack. So there's pressure rate and then there's sack rate, right? There's enough times that you're getting him out of the pocket. Now, what we'll see, and I'll show you a comparison stat for the Saints after this and Derek Carr, because I'm not a Derek Carr guy, despite what my former podcast co-host Alex Bryant likes to say about me on the internet. Don't believe anything that guy says. But Derek Carr, for all the pressure that he saw, has a drastically lower rate because he did understand when to get rid of the ball. Even if he looked completely unathletic as he is doing it, he got rid of the ball instead of taking the sacks. And some of that also, though, is that Bryce Young is a creator, right? He extend plays. And he got himself in trouble, I think, when he was trying to calibrate how much could he extend plays against the NFL. Now that he has a clear idea of what he can and can't find success doing, I don't anticipate that number being the same number this year.
One question I had for both of you guys off this, we see this 65 sacks last year. Where would you like to see that range? Obviously, we want it as low as possible, but where do you think realistically Carolina is going to be as far as sacks on Bryce Young this year. Do you think, is it closer to half and half? Is it closer to 40? I personally think it'll be around that 40-ish range. I think they can, I mean, that's a considerable decrease from where they're at this past season. But where do you guys think with these new additions on the O-line?
Yeah, I wish that I had written down like the team averages or the league averages. You know what I mean? I do, and how much of the percentage of those sacks came from the interior of the offensive line as opposed to giving up on the outside, right? Because our tackles are going to remain the same, at least for as long as Icky earns that position. But the interior, man, you got to think about it. Robert Hunt, I believe, gave up 0 sacks, maybe 1 sack last year. And in the years prior, I think it's the same, right in that 1 to 2 range. So I don't anticipate us giving up double-digit sacks from that spot. And I think that we probably did from the right guard spot last year. Center is a very similar situation. I don't anticipate it. So I think you could cut that in half. I would like to see 30, somewhere in that range. If you have to have sacks, I think that 30 is halfway acceptable. That's a little bit more than, or right around 2 a game, right? 34 sacks is 2 a game.
Yeah, I agree. I think cutting it in half is definitely realistic when you pair Canales' philosophy with getting the ball out quickly, with them working on Bryce Young's footwork, not taking so deep of a drop back, which kind of, Icky took his lumps last year. Icky was bad, but also the deep drop backs didn't help him at all in certain situations that Bryce Young, was taking that deeper drop than normal, paired with the additions on the offensive line. And I think it's just a much improved group. I don't think anybody's going to deny that around the league. So I think cutting it in half, maybe 30, 35 sacks is definitely attainable, and it should be what we see this year.
One more thing before we go to the defensive side. These rushing numbers shock me. They really do.
Yeah.
I keep seeing the 48 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. I mean, that's to be 15th, about half in the league. That just goes out to Chuba. Like, most people counted this guy out. Everyone was like, yeah, this was Matt Rule's wife making this pick. We all know that when that came out. And this guy, back against the wall, they bring in Miles Sanders, pay him a boatload of money. And this guy just went out and balled out last year. So I just wanted to shout him out. I think it's impressive from what he did with in behind a very shitty offensive line last year.
Yeah.
So
I did look up real quickly just for reference. The Buccaneers last year gave up 40 sacks, and they were right around the middle of the pack, probably right in like the 12th to 13th range. If we were to get 34, 35, we would be top 10 in the league. And I will say this, though. I don't think that that's wrong for us to anticipate being top 10 in the league because we paid all of that money. So if you're going to pay $100 million to your right guard and $50 million to your left guard, you have a 6th overall pick on the left side, and then you have your stalwart Taylor Moton. I think it's okay to expect big things from the offensive line. I know that fans don't like to be told that you can have high expectations for a team that just went 2-15. That's what all of the arguments are about. But they allocated a shit ton of money to a position that should upgrade the team. So I do have high hopes for that unit.
Yeah, and the Carolina Panthers have the highest paid offensive line in the NFL. So
yep.
So yeah, I mean, expecting big Curtis. Things from them is okay.
Jumping the gun. All right, let's go defense now.
So the defense is interesting because everyone knows Evero is a brilliant defensive mind and that he's able to schematically compensate for some shortcomings in personnel, right? I think that's a pretty widely agreed upon basis. But you see there the points per game, 24.5. It was 29th in the league. Gave up a good amount of points, right? Yards per game, also its game flow, its circumstances, but we were stingy. We gave up 294 yards per game, 4th best in the league. Pass yards per game, we know that there's context behind that, but it also doesn't go without noting that the secondary is Evero's calling card. That's where he makes his hay. That is where Jonathan Cooley makes his hay. That is where D'Angelo Hall is a very good young coach, in my opinion. The rush yards per game you see there, 122.4. That was 23rd in the league, which I actually think is pretty impressive because you had Shai Tuttle as a nose tackle. You had the ghost of Deshaun Williams playing the other end, Frankie Louvu and Kamu Grugier-Hill. As much as I love Frankie Louvu, Kamu Grugier-Hill and Frankie can be moved by bigger men. That wasn't their block shedding, wasn't exactly their forte either, right? Kamu was supposed to be our special teams ace and was thrusted into a starting position. So I think that with the moves they've made this year, man, I fully anticipate seeing a nice revival there. 5.8 pass yards per play, 8th in the league. The interesting thing there is 4.1 rush yards per play. That's 12th in the league. That's not that bad. It was the volume that people were running it on us because they had the lead. They would just sit there and hand the rock off, and they were like, why should we throw it, right? Like, it was almost like that Pop Warner mercy rule. Like, man, we're up by 17. Just run the damn ball. Like, don't show out on them. 59.8 plays a game. That's 4th most. Again, that's just kind of game flow and the context around them. 50% of the time, teams called pass plays against us. That's exactly what we were just talking about. That's bottom of the league. They didn't want to throw against our coverage because Evero was really smart with it. And the thing that he does is he disguises coverage. He will show you middle of the field open, and that's a pre-snap look. And then after the snap, post-snap, he's dropped back into cover 2 or cover 1, cover 3, right, where he's got that safety manning the middle of the field. And it completely changes what the quarterback's pre-snap reads and adjustments might have been because now the coverage is completely different. So, yeah, that's the basic rundown on the Panthers defense last year.
Well, I think it's important to note, too, is teams had leads in the fourth quarter. Carolina never had a lead in the fourth quarter, so they weren't passing the ball a lot. That's why we saw a dip more than likely with Brian Burns' numbers and his sacks last year. So I think that plays into a little bit. And, you know, Carolina's run defense has just struggled for years. And I'm confident in saying I think it's going to vastly improve this season with the guys they brought in as free agents. So, I mean, I think that gives me a little bit of confidence. Obviously, we know this, you know, the cornerback room is light. We have already talked about the edge room and the depth there. And, you know, and we'll get into it later, but that cornerback room, it's like, you know, these guys haven't played together at all. I mean, it's been dangerous. A handful of practices, which is
dangerous.
Crazy.
But you know what it also is the cornerback room last year was sans JC Horn for most of the year. If JC could be healthy, and I understand that's a huge caveat, but if he's healthy, man, that's like getting a all-pro caliber player just inserted into the lineup. Now, Mike Jackson and all of the other tall basketball framed players that we just signed, yeah, they haven't played together and they're not familiar with the scheme, but they at least fit what the scheme wants them to be. Last year, we were literally trying to make, you know, what is it, chicken salad out of chicken shit. Like that, and Evero still managed to make an edible product at the end of the day. So if you give him actual ingredients, maybe it's not fresh market ingredients, maybe it is Food Lion, but if it's the actual ingredients, he can still make the dish. Like it's Chopped Kitchen, right? He goes into the pantry stocked. It might not be the finest foods, but he can make it work. So I have a little bit of faith in that, man.
Yeah, I think what sticks out to me is I'm looking at the points per game, 24.5, and in my mind, I'm like, that's not a lot of points per game, I feel like, in my opinion, to give up. And it's 29th in the league. So that shocks me a little bit, honestly, because, you know, with all the prolific offenses and, you know, passing the ball, you know, that's the big thing now. And to only allow 24.5 points per game, and it's 29th in the league, they got to get better there. And what teams were doing is they got a lead pretty quickly against this bad offense and just ran the ball, obviously, with the 23rd ranked defense, rush defense, and they weren't passing with only 50% passes. So I think, you know, hopefully getting that number a little lower with the additions of, I think even Dave Canales mentioned today in his presser, the additions of guys that are familiar with this scheme, with Ashawn, Nick Scott, Josie Jewell, and so forth. Like, you know, adding those guys to this system that Evero runs is only going to make it better. And I definitely expect the rush defense to be much better, much improved. But like we mentioned earlier, that I'm not certain where those sacks are going to come from unless it's manufactured pressure. So
I'm not going to lie with you guys, and we'll get into this much more later, but I'm concerned with this defense. I really am, and I'm torn because I love Evero so much, and I believe in him so much as a coach that I think he's going to be a head coach next season. But there is a lot of pieces they lost this offseason, and if you watch that Buffalo preseason game, there was 2 starters not out there, and it was J.C. Horn and Clowney. And that offense, second team offense, moved pretty damn easily on that defense all the way down the field and they missed a touchdown. They overthrew a guy, I think it was against Jameson, and it would have been a score.
Yeah.
And they ended up kicking a field goal.
And Jameson ended up probably losing his job because of that game.
Yeah.
And DiCaprio Boodle the same way. So like that is a little bit of context to add in, because you're right, man. Like that was a disappointing performance, I thought. When you have 90-ish% of your starting lineup, 85% of your starting lineup, and you give that up. But then we also made 3 corresponding moves essentially to change the starting lineup after that, right? Like our lineup now is completely different than it would have been.
It is, which is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. It really is.
No,
I don't know a team that has done that. Like they literally wiped their entire cornerback room besides their number one. Like
there's something.
I guess Troy Hill's there too as well.
Yeah,
but like,
there's something so reckless about it though that it makes me almost feel like a weird calm. It's like the eye of a tornado where I'm like, look, there's chaos everywhere. Like if it goes to hell, it's not unexpected for me. But like there's also this calmness to me because I'm like, Evero ID'd something. He keyed in on something, and so did Dave Canales, and so did Dan Morgan. They had this meeting of the minds after seeing this performance and the whole summer's performance. And we're like, guys, we got to just do something. We got to go for it here. Because if we don't, I'm pretty confident in the way this is going to go. And it's not going to go well for us. But if it's not going to go well for us with these small guys that were in decent position, to be completely fair, Deshaun Jameson was in fair position in a lot of his plays. He's just a small guy. And that got him in trouble a lot. And that's why his hyper aggressiveness seemed almost necessary, is because he had to make up for the fact that he didn't have the size and the reach to make those plays that he was in position to make. So I don't know, man. Maybe I am just kind of like sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit because we're 4 days away from actually seeing this team play, and I'm getting all jacked up. I'm drinking this unicorn juice and a bevy of beers. So like, yeah, maybe I'm getting a little delusional, but I do feel pretty cool about the fact that they made a decision on the fly like this, so that they're running with it.
Yeah, and let's think about this aspect of it. How many years in a row have we heard the saying that the answer is on the roster, that next man up? I think it's refreshing to have a coaching staff and a front office who says, no, fuck that. The answer is not on the roster. We got to go out there and find somebody else because these guys aren't getting the job done. And they like when Canales first got to Carolina, he made the statement that he has no emotional connection to any player on this roster, and that's not gonna get in the way of him or cloud his judgment in making a decision to improve a room. So I think not rolling with guys just because you're comfortable with them because they've been in the system throughout training camp or the previous season, them identifying these guys are just not working. And I was a big Deshaun Jameson fan myself. Curtis knows that. I like Jameson. I thought that he was a promising young player, but like you mentioned, Ricky, smaller guy, smaller corner, and obviously Evero wants these lengthy corners that have a little bit of speed.
Did he go back on a practice squad?
I don't think so.
I can't recall seeing him sign anywhere, man. And again though, I just don't know that he's necessarily the athlete that you want for a nickel corner, but he has the build and the frame for a nickel corner. Mm-hmm. But his skill set and the way that he plays is much more as a boundary. Like that out of bounds line is his friend. That helps him play more aggressively. When you put him in space, his side to side lateral ability isn't what you want, man. And like from a nickel at least. And that's what Troy Hill brings. That's what Cho Smith-Wade brings. So I just think that they were in this rock and a hard place because I'm with Bryson. I don't think Deshaun Jameson is a bad football player. I think he's a pretty good football player. I just think he's in no man's land when it comes to his position.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a risky. It's either going to be a pick or he's giving up a big play. I mean, that's just the type of player he is. He's going to go for it all. All right, let's do the deep dive here on the defense. Go ahead.
Will you blow that graphic up for me so that I can see what I'm
putting on here? I'll make it so you don't need a magnifying glass to read it.
Thank you, sir. So the Carolina Panthers defense registered 27 sacks. That's bottom of the barrel. We also had generated only 29.8% quarterback pressure rate. That's bottom of the barrel. And then our team sack rate was 5.2%, and stop traffic, it was only second worst in the league. We weren't the absolute most putrid team at that. But what that tells you is that we had no attack, and we didn't finish when we had attack, right? Like that just all across the board that has to improve. And we're asking that unit to improve sans the best pass rusher we've had in 5 years, right? Outside of Hassan Reddick. He's gone. Now, the thought process there is Jadeveon Clowney has matured a lot as a pass rusher and does seem intent to bring that to the defense, despite the fact that his prowess is as an edge-setting run defender. I do think that Jadeveon Clowney can have a nice productive season for us here. I don't know that it's going to touch double-digit sacks, but I think 8-9 sacks, I think, is in the realm of possibilities for Jadeveon. I just don't know who complements him on the other side. I hope they give Iku and Jamie all of the tries in the world, especially in known pass rush situations, because I do think that they're much better from a specialist standpoint and from an effort standpoint than DJ Johnson is. We gave up 57 rushes of 10-plus yards allowed. That was 25th in the league, which honestly to me isn't as awful as I anticipated. But what it does show, and this next stat will feed into my thought here, we were bad with missed tackles because we were 23%, or we had a 23% team run stuff rate. A team run stuff rate means that is a rushing attempt that you stop for no gain or a loss. 23% of opponents' runs we stopped for no gain or a loss. But then we allowed 57 of 10-plus yards. That's missed tackles, in my opinion, and it's a lack of discipline as far as gap integrity. Again, that kind of speaks to the linebackers, those secondary level defenders, and what we were asking them to do and what their actual natural fit on defense is. I think that Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson offer a whole lot more there. I think that when Trevin Wallace plays as a read and react linebacker, I think that he offers a whole lot more there. Evero dialed up blitzes on 35.1% of his defensive calls. That was fifth best in the league, fifth most. Again, that's something that he has to do because we didn't have winners on the outside. I think you're going to see a lot of that same thing this season. And he brings a lot of his pressure from second level defenders or even from the third level, right? Safeties, nickel corners, delayed blitzes. And that's part of his disguise tactic is that he likes to move guys around. And right there, the next stat is 24.8% of the times you saw a stacked box look. Stacked box is 8 defenders in that box or around the tackles, right, of the offensive line. That's 8 men sitting right there in front. That, again, is one of those elements and those byproducts of his disguises because he will have the safeties up close. He will have the nickels tucked in, condensed. And then sometimes that will move post-snap. But it also was our run defense isn't very good. We need to help these guys as much as we can. So they brought in extra reinforcement. It will be interesting to see what those percentages look like this year for us, I believe.
Bryson, any observations from this?
Yeah. What the hell was Brian Burns doing last season? That's my observation. I know Curtis is very set in his ways on this, and I've been hard on Brian Burns since he got to Carolina. I thought that there was a lot left on the table in regards to opportunity and sack numbers and pressures and all of that. So to see the pressure rate at 32nd in the league, I get opposite of him. There wasn't a whole lot. But this is a guy that, was highly touted as, one of the best pressure rate getters in the league. And seeing that we were the worst is frustrating. And we all know about his numbers last season as well. I personally was happy that they did not pay Brian Burns because I don't think that he is worth the amount of money that he's garnered in New York. Now, the trade compensation wasn't happy with just because of what we heard, the 8 months prior to trading him that they turned down. And then they end up taking a second and a fourth or whatever it was from New York. So that was frustrating. But I think my take is that Jadeveon Clowney this season is going to be better than what Brian Burns was at any point in Carolina.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, he's also a 30-plus-year-old defensive end. But, Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into Brian Burns. You guys know where I stand on that. I think it was a mistake, and we'll see how it pans out moving forward. Um, but I don't want to get into that because that opened up a whole new can of worms.
You say you don't want to get into
Um,
it. You want to get into it. You just don't want to take the time of getting into it.
exactly. Let's take a quick break here. We're going to come back, talk about the Saints. 30 seconds. Stick with us here. We appreciate all you guys. Chat, liven up a little bit. Ask us any questions you guys want, and we will answer them to the best of our knowledge. And we'll be right back after this. Exciting news, Panther fans. I'm thrilled to announce our partnership with BetStamp and Sign Up Expert, opening up an incredible opportunity for you to join sportsbooks in your area to get the best odds and new user offers. Head over to our dedicated page at signupexpert.com/Panthers to explore a selection of sportsbooks tailored to your region, each with unique offerings. If you're ready to take sports betting to the next level and show some love to Panthers on Tap, I highly recommend signing up for your next sportsbook through our Sign Up Expert link. All right, let's just kind of tease ahead here a little bit. We will be coming up, you guys, once we get through this, of talking about some of the bets that we are, keying in on for this weekend. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about it. Just looking through the chat here, because we did miss a couple questions, so I apologize.
Yeah, I saw at least one. I believe
Mike
it was Mike
Hollinger.
Hollinger. Yep.
Yeah, Mike Hollinger says, are we going to actually see Bryce Young under center this year? Any one of you guys want to fire away at that one?
Bryson, start us off, man.
Short answer, yes. I think that we, there's been a lot of reports about Dave Canales' philosophy and putting Bryson in a situation to what he does well. And we know that he does well under center, and we did not see that last year really at all. And I think that throughout the preseason, throughout training camp, we've seen already a lot more than we have in year one. So I think that Canales is going to put Bryce in situations where he's comfortable and he is able to succeed. And I think that is one of the situations under center that he will be able to, whether it's play action or just a drop back. I think we are going to see some Bryce under center, which is, I think, going to result in much better play moving forward for Bryce.
Unequivocally, I think so too. Just jumping off what you said, I think we're actually going to see more than what we saw in preseason, even because you saw it a little bit in practice, and I think they're going to take advantage. But you're going to see under center play action. You're going to see pistol still, straight shotgun. So I think there's going to be a good mix. I doubt, we're going to come out week one and be bamboozled that Carolina just starts running pistol that they never ran in preseason last year or practice. They're like, surprise, here's our
wing tea, baby, wing tea.
Here's our chocolate chips on the vanilla ice cream. I mean, that was just so random. It was crazy because we all saw it. Like, we're like, what the hell? Like, everyone on Twitter, was pointing it out. So, I'm sure the teams are, sitting back to, what the hell is this?
I also think that one of the built-in ways that we'll see him under center a little bit more, my answer, again, is like Bryson, short answer, yes. I can't really give too much detail because I am not in that room and I don't know. So I hate to try to make it seem like I know more than I do because I don't even know that much to begin with. But the 12 personnel usage, I think, is going to be key as well because you're going to see more 12 personnel than we saw, I don't know, in the last decade with the Carolina Panthers. And when you have two tight ends out there, you're not typically running that out of shotgun. So I think that you can expect to see a healthy balance of Bryson shotgun because that is also where he's comfortable. There's nothing wrong with Bryson shotgun. He operates very well out of that. It gives him a little bit of an advantage in the timing of things sometimes. It can even help with his mechanics on the drop back where, you could kind of shorten that up a little bit and get his feet work set. But I do think you're going to see a whole lot more. Curtis brought up the play action. I think that is critical. And then I think the 12 personnel is really just going to feed into seeing him more under center.
And one more, Zach, we'll get to your question in a little bit because we're going to be talking about the Saints coming up here. But I want to get this question because it's kind of focused on the offense. We did kind of answer it last week, but we still appreciate it. And we love the chat. And I'll just say, if you watched us last week, I think we were all between me, Bryson, and Ricky, between I think 500 and like 700-ish yards for
Yeah, I think I was
Xavier
750. I
Legette.
had the most. Yeah.
What did you have for touchdowns? I think I had 3 or 4. I can't
I believe
remember.
I had 6 touchdowns. I think that if I remember correctly, my line was 52 receptions for 750 yards and 6 touchdowns. I saw him as a big play guy. I think he was averaging like 14 yards a reception or something, which, by the way, is relatively similar to DK Metcalf's rookie season and usage, which I think isn't necessarily how they're going to use him, but it's not a terrible barometer for an explosive guy who is still working on some of the more refined nuances of the position.
Yeah, I had 40 for 540 and 3 touchdowns, 40 receptions, 540 yards. I think it's taken him a little bit to get acclimated with some of the injuries he's had in training camp. I don't know. I think maybe Panthers let him loose and that could help, but I just think there's going to be some timing things to get under control between him and Bryce and trying to figure that out, as we kind of saw last year with Mingo. And, Mingo wasn't really hurt at all. And there was still like a period where him and Bryce had to get acclimated. So I think that's why I kind of chose the lower numbers. But I mean, the guy's he's a physical freak. That his traits are off the charts. It's, can he put that all together and can he stay healthy? And hopefully for our sake, he does this whole season. And, him and Bryce get that connection going early and often. But Bryson, do you remember yours off the top of your head?
I have it right here. I had 64 receptions, 650 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I think anything in between 500 yards and 600 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns is a successful season, in my opinion, for Legette. We all know that the injuries he's suffered early on. I think he's going to have a lot of manufactured touches. I really think he's going to improve the yak that we talked about earlier, just based off of his physical abilities, like you talked about, Curtis. And I think, honestly, just a successful season is people to quit talking about his accent and making fun of the way he talks. If we get to that point, I think it's a successful season for him, in my opinion.
That is never going away. I hate that, but it just isn't.
Yep.
I mean, that's the way other fans are with other fan base. I just wanted to run down some numbers from rookie wide receivers last year and some of their stats. So we obviously know Puka Nakua's, awesome season last year. But some of the other rookies, Zay Flowers, 858 yards, Jaden Reed, 793, Josh Downs, 770, Tank Dell, who played outstanding. He obviously got hurt. He only played 11 games. He had 709. So just kind of in that range. Smith and Jigba had 628.
And I think those are like really good years, right, for a rookie wide receiver. I think that if XL didn't hit those, because of the fact that you have Deontay Johnson, because of the fact that you still have Adam Thielen and Jonathan Mingo, if he is ascending, there is at least some competition there. So if he hits 500 yards, I think that it's promising at least. But I don't think there's anything wrong. Again, man, maybe this is my thing tonight. I don't think there's anything wrong with high expectations on some of these players. I like Xavier Legette a lot, and he is explosive, and they brought him in for a reason. Dave Canales told him before the draft that he wanted to use him in a particular way. I think everyone remembers what that is, and it's as Mike Evans, right? Yeah. If your head coach has that confidence in you, and that's why they move up to get you and get that 5th year, I don't think they're just going to like slow play this. I think Curtis made a really good point when he said it. He had injuries during camp, but what if they come out and just let him loose? That might be.
I think they do. I really think they do.
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
Because you haven't seen him and I mentioned this a lot. Ricky, I don't know if you, and we haven't, I don't know if we've talked about this really at all, but I've mentioned this to Bryson a couple times. When I was at the practices, I didn't see Legette with Bryce a lot in practice formations. And I think we did maybe talk about this last week.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they're just going to literally, he comes out and he's rolling like right off the gate. And I don't think teams are expecting that.
Right. No, I agree 100%. He didn't get a ton of burn with the first team.
And that's not slighting Mingo. I think Mingo's done a hell of a job.
Yep.
And I think he's going to get a ton of reps too. I
think Mingo ends up stealing more reps from Adam Thielen than he does from Xavier Legette. And that's in a perfect scenario, right? If Mingo really is taking that step, you can phase Thielen out. And we talked about this on last week's show as well. But Mingo is a power slot. That is, you give him advantageous opportunities to create an easier release for him and let him get that runway going, kind of similar to XL, but XL has a little bit more to it, in my opinion. And he's a different physical specimen with the reach and going up and high pointing the ball. So yeah, man, I think that you're onto something there, Curtis. I wouldn't be shocked if everything everyone said about, look, man, let him slow roll out and let him learn the offense, let him get his feet underneath him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come out and gallop like a damn racehorse to 100 yards in a tutty against the Saints.
Well, and I think Canales hinted at it a little bit today in his presser. When I heard it, I was like, man, Curtis is probably smiling ear to ear right now. But Canales mentioned that, he would rather put his young guys out there and take lumps early on in the year to see what they have in these guys and not be scared to put the young guys on the field because you don't think they're not ready. I mean, I think Canales has the philosophy that Curtis mentioned last week, in particular, talking about Ja'Tavion Sanders. You would rather have your young guys out there learning on the fly than putting these guys like Ian Thomas on the field that what you have in him and that isn't great. So maybe you put Sanders out there. Maybe you put Xavier Legette out there before the world thinks he's ready and they surprise everyone.
Yep. 100%.
No, I think that's all great points. Let's go. We'll get into Zach's question here shortly, but let's shift over. We are going to be covering the Saints, looking at, this is their opponent this week. So we're going to do some, Ricky puts together some stuff too on them. So we'll
I'll go
to that
quicker
now.
on this one. I won't try to bore anybody, but it's important to talk about what the other team does. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
100%.
All right. So the Saints offense, and here's the interesting thing for me too. They haven't completely changed their offensive build very much this offseason. They're a pretty familiar team to what they were last season. The big differences that they had is that they drafted Talise Fuaga, the chronic right tackle out of Oregon State, terrific prospect as a right tackle, and then asked him to go ahead and move over to left tackle for the first time in his life.
Because no one could beat out Penning at right tackle.
Yeah, because then they have Trevor Penning, who was the guy that they drafted in the first round the year prior out of Northern Iowa to be their franchise left tackle, and they've already kicked him to the right side. So really interesting dynamic there, I think. But last year, let's just look at that first. 23.6 points per game. That was 9th best in the league, which is kind of surprising to me because they're not a terrific offensive team. But you know what? They had veteran players, right? Like that's the thing about Derek Carr, man. He's not a exciting, he's not a right home about kind of quarterback, but he'll do the job. He's got the ability to do the job. I just don't like him, and I don't think that he plays a fun brand. I don't think he plays a dangerous brand of the game, and he is way more inclined to make himself safe than he is to take risks for the team. Yards per game, 337.2. That's 14th, right middle of the road. 234.7 pass yards per game. That's 11th in the league. 102.5 rush yards per game. That was 21st. That's an interesting stat, too, because, Jamal Williams is a pretty good running back. I think Alvin Kamara is a little bit on the downslide of his career, if I had to guess. And that's no slight to him. He's still a good player, but he was a dynamic player. You're talking about a guy who had fantasy teams named Lights Kamara Action, right? Like this was the guy that you centered your entire thing around. And I don't think he's necessarily that player at this stage of his career. 6.2 pass yards per play, right again, a median of the league. And that's a common theme with a Derek Carr-led offense. You're going to find a lot of median of the league type of statistics when it comes to the throwing of the football. 3.6 rushing yards per play, 31st in the league. We had a better rushing yard per play than they did. They just didn't run as many runs. You know what I mean? They had a little bit more of the explosives. 65.9 plays, that was 4th most. And they did run a little bit more of an up-tempo, and they also trailed in a good amount of games. So, like, the game flow and flow or story of the games also goes into that. 57% of the time they threw the ball, 16th. What do you know? Dead in the middle of the pack once again. That's it. It's just Derek Carr. It should be Derek dead in the middle of the pack Carr. That should just be how he's called. It might even be his legal name on his birth certificate. I don't know. I'd have to call his mother.
So to be fair, I don't know if you know this about me, Ricky, but my younger brother is a Saints fan.
I'm
my
sorry
sister,
to hear that.
Yeah, my sister lived in New Orleans for like 10 years. So when he was growing up, he kind of became a fan because she was there. But
Yeah,
they did get it.
I get it.
Yeah, he did for sure. They did get a new offensive coordinator this past offseason, and Clint Kubiak coming over from San Francisco as their pass game coordinator. So I do expect the offense to be a little different. But I agree with you. I think Derek Carr is a lame duck. I would not be surprised if we see Spencer Rattler week 10, 11, 12
Woo.
as the starting QB in New Orleans. I think
I don't know. I hear Ricky's a Derek Carr guy.
All right, Curtis. That's strike one, buddy. I already told you I had to take some deep consideration to even show back up this week.
And I will say my brother, being a Saints fan, who's, I would say he's a pretty big fan like us in Carolina. He is excited about the prospect of Rattler and them moving on from Carr as quickly as possible. But you're rolling back into a season with Dennis Allen, who's a head coach that should have been fired probably 2 years ago. I don't think this team strikes any fear into me whatsoever. But we'll get into the predictions later. But I think the offense could look a little different just because of the new offensive scheme, the new offensive coordinator in general, in New Orleans. But with Derek Carr at quarterback, I don't know how much different it's going to look.
Yeah, and also shout out the homie Bland in the chat there talking about Cook. Bland will be live here a little bit later tonight. Good to see him in here. And then Panther Bo, man, that's my guy right there. Y'all know Panther Bo? That's a terrific dude. That's a great follow on Twitter.
Yeah,
too.
he was asking who loves Carr more, fans or teammates. I think it's Ricky.
I think that fans is a weird way to spell my name, but I'll take it. Like
Ricky, were you one of the guys that when Derek Carr came for a visit to Carolina?
Absolutely not. No. What started this whole fucking hateful rhetoric about Derek Carr was when they signed him. When the Saints signed Derek Carr, we drafted Bryce Young. What I said was at that moment, Derek Carr was the most accomplished quarterback in the NFC South he was the best quarterback in the NFC South until Bryce Young took a snap on an NFL field. That's what it was. So I keep getting hell for saying that he was the best quarterback in the NFC South when everything he had done previously in his career was better than Baker Mayfield, than Desmond Ridder, and then the rookie who had never taken a snap. You know what? If I could go back, if Doc Brown would throw me in his DeLorean and gun it to 88 right now, I would take it all back.
Let's get to Zach's question. You mentioned Taysom Hill, and I didn't pull his question up. I apologize. There we go. So, is there any more annoying Saints player than Taysom Hill? I fully agree with this one. I cannot stand this dude, and for some reason, Carolina struggles against Taysom Hill every time they play him, and the announcers love this guy. I don't understand it. Every time he's on the field, he's the most talked about player in that, in the broadcast booth, and it drives me fucking nuts. I don't know what it is about him, but I can't stand any bit of it. And he's one of the most, him and Cameron Jordan, I hate on that team.
Did you see the thing with Dennis Allen and Kay Adams when he was talking about, where would I play him? Oh, I think I'd play him at like weak side linebacker. I think I could have him out there, and I think he'd just make plays all over the field. That's what Dennis Allen, his head coach, said. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, fucking do it, man. Please do it. Like, I get it that you want him to be some sort of gadget player on offense because he played at, the Mormon School of America, BYU, and, he didn't have sex for his entire adult life. So he was able to focus on running the football a little bit more than the casual person. But regardless, I think that if you're talking about throwing him into any other NFL position just because he's an athlete, that's so wildly dismissive of the NFL athletes that play that position and that have been doing it for so long. Taysom Hill can take a shotgun snap and make a correct read, and he is willing to be physical, and he has more speed than your typical quarterback, right? Let's don't romanticize this guy. He is listed as a tight end in fantasy, and how many receptions does the idiot have? Like, and I say idiot just because he's a division foe. I'm sure he's a very smart individual. I get fired up when I talk about the rivals, right? He's an idiot. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. I forget that I'm on this show where you got your resident villain who likes to throw around all kinds of, hijinks for other players. But yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. Taysom Hill is just a nuisance, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just say this. I remember when Sean Payton, and I give my brother shit about this all the time, so we talk about it quite frequently. When Sean Payton was the head coach in New Orleans, he made a comment that Taysom Hill was the next Joe Montana. We're still looking for that. I think that Taysom Hill is even the third or fourth quarterback listed on the roster
Are
because
we
he's a
sure
tight
he
end.
didn't mean Joe Montana, the Lifetime actor?
Yeah. And Sean Payton is currently employed as the Broncos head coach and not the New Orleans Saints head coach, and Taysom Hill's a tight end. So I think I agree with both of you. Taysom Hill is by far the most annoying player on this roster. And like Curtis said, anytime he's on the field, whoever the Saints are playing, that's all the announcers talk about is Taysom Hill and how good he is as a gadget player. And, year in and year out, he's not really making a difference for this team.
Well, what's odd to
drastically.
me about it, it's not, and I get it because he's division, so we're gonna bash him for it too. And this may be coming to his defense a little bit, but like it's not like he's out there like, yeah, give me this all. Like it's just the announcers just the minute he went on that field, the minute the Saints took him off the Packers practice squad, it was like they just love this dude. I don't get. I don't understand the obsession with the guy. Again, I can't stand him. And the Saints. Kubiak, Bryson mentioned it, coming over pass game coordinator for San Fran, first time OC. So we'll see what he does with this offense. But he said in training camp he wants to increase Hill's, his playing time and his, what he has in this offense. So, and I'll admit it, Carolina has struggled to contain him. They have. Like Taysom Hill has whooped the Panthers defense the past couple of years, which I hope they can contain him this year. But it's like, that's another reason why I hate him.
Could this finally be where we figure out what the anti-venom is for a Shanahan-based offense? And you have to give them Derek Carr and the Saints supporting cast? Like, could this finally be where we see this offense not just churn out a top 5 offense? Maybe.
I think it's a realistic expectation because of the lack of just talent overall.
The fall of a Shanahan offense comes right down to Derek Carr.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, I don't think Carr is. I think his time in the NFL is dwindling very quickly. And like Bryson said, I wouldn't be shocked if Rattler is in mid-season. Yep. And I think, and I know Saints fans will admit this, I don't think Dennis Allen's a head coach. He's a hell of a defensive coordinator, but he's not a head coach. Yep. And they made a mistake by keeping him around another year. Let's go to the next. Let's get into the deep dive. We said we weren't going to talk about that as much.
I know. Look, we spent more time on the Saints than we did the Panthers. All right, blow that thing up for me, if you will, Curtis. All right. So the deep dives for the offense for the Saints. And again, I kind of try to keep a little common theme here so that we could compare and contrast. They had 42 rushes of 10-plus yards, 25th. And again, that's the interesting part, right? That's with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams, who are widely, probably from a consensus public opinion, thought of as the better running backs than Chuba Hubbard. 57.9% of rushes outside the tackles for them. That shows that they had a different approach than what the Carolina Panthers did, and that's something that I would watch for here, because now that you have Tylese Fuaga over there on that left side and Trevor Penning on the right side, that is where they're going to want to flow these run concepts through. They're going to want to run behind their nasty offensive linemen that they believe in so much that they've moved them into these critical areas. 2.57 rushing yards per after contact. That's 29th in the league. And that kind of goes to what I was saying about the diminishing skill set of a guy like Alvin Kamara, because, and look, he was suspended and injured for much of last year. Jamal Williams, we know that Dennis Allen feels about Kendre Miller the way that I feel about Taysom Hill. Like, it would be better if he wasn't around. I think that he is just waiting for this guy to quit football because he keeps trying to usher him out of the door. It's one of the wildest interactions with a head coach and a player I've seen in a while. If you're not familiar with that, check that out. 35.4% quarterback pressure rate allowed for the New Orleans Saints, with a 5.5% quarterback sack rate. That's 6th best in the league. So 24th worst for the quarterback pressure rate and 6th best on the sack rate. Bryson, that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier about the quarterback does play a part in this, because they got pressure. Opponents got pressure 24th most in the league. Like that, they were going after him. They were able to find weaknesses, but Derek Carr was able to mitigate that risk and the overall damage of those pressures. They ran play action less than we did, which is remarkable in my opinion. 13.4%. I think you see that number jump a lot, as we were just talking about with Clint Kubiak in town. They have to. That's a staple of a Shanahan offense. So that's something to take a eye on Sunday. 1,857 team yak, 24th in the league. When you had slants Mike Thomas for the little bit of games that he played, you knew that he wasn't getting any yak. Chris Olave is a very good player. He's a good route runner. Derek Carr didn't give a ton of – Derek Carr throws a lot of hospital balls. He didn't give a whole ton of leadway with some of his throws. A.T. Perry's a big physical receiver, but I don't think that he's the yak guy. Rashid Shaheed is their dynamic, explosive player. That's going to be a guy that I have my eyes on this week because I think that he's the one that can open up and make you pay if you're not paying attention and you don't make the right read on his first move because he runs a lot of double moves. If he can beat you on those double moves, I think you could be in trouble because he's got track speed. So of these offensive keys, what do you guys look at and say, I need to pay attention to that for Sunday's matchup?
I'll start with the play action. You know, I think under Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator, like we talked about, that's going to change a little bit under that Shanahan offense. So, you know, I agree with you, Ricky, that is surprising. They ran it less than us. I didn't know that there was an offense that was more incompetent than we were, but hey, it looks like the Saints might have been. You know, I think with a running back like Kamara, and then I know their rookie last year, and I think he's in the second year now. Keandre Miller is injured, I believe. I don't think he's going to be playing, but brings another dynamic aspect to that running back room with Jamal Williams. I think, you know, we could see more of that play action under Kubiak, so maybe keep an eye out for that and then making that a focal point moving forward, you know, bringing in a new coordinator overall. But I think, like you mentioned, Ricky, the interesting thing for me overall is that quarterback sack rate and Carr getting that ball out quickly. I think that is an underrated aspect of what he does. It might not be accurate, it might not be to his own team, but he does get the ball out quickly. And getting him down, getting a sack is a little bit harder to do against a veteran guy like Carr. So, you know, they're going to have their struggles on the offensive line. The Saints have issues there. That is without a doubt a fact. We saw Trevor Penning in the preseason. He struggles. So if they can get there, they got to get him down.
Right. That's what I was going to say, is that this Panthers team struggles to capitalize, right? We talked about that with their pressure rate and their team sack rate and all that. When they get opportunities on Sunday, because they will get them, this Panthers defense has to capitalize on those opportunities, whether it's Jadeveon Clowney, whether it's Iku, whether it's DJ Johnson, or whether it's Jamie Sheriff. Capitalize on opportunities. Make them pay for being bad at pass protection. Like, make them pay, man.
And one thing I'll give the Carr credit to is he's a tough son of a gun. Like he got beat up pretty bad in Oakland with the Raiders, and he's taken some shots too in New Orleans as well. So I think he's a pretty tough guy. But going off of, you know, what a big surprise, my biggest thing is the number you show at the rushes outside the tackle. I think that's our biggest test with our edge rushers. You know, they talk. DJ Johnson, he's good at setting the edge. All right, let's see it this weekend because, you know, I get it. I do think, you know, Kamara still, you know, isn't at where he was in maybe a couple of years ago, but I still think he's a pretty damn good back in this league. And, you know, I think that's going to be a big test for them. You know, Clowney, I'm not as worried about, obviously, but, you know, that other side, when they go attack, you know, DJ Johnson or Leota, and Sheriff and some of these other guys, are they going to be able to contain that and keep this guy, you know, and kick him back inside? And, you know, and then now you're facing Derek Brown and Ashawn Robinson. I'm way more comfortable with that. So that concerns the hell out of me. They're just looking at that number. It's like, damn, like they definitely are going to try to take advantage of that. And we'll see if, this rush defense has truly improved go ahead.
Oh, no. I wasn't trying to interrupt you. Sorry, man. I was trying to piggyback off of what you were saying about the run with Alvin Kamara, though. We talked about, like, the run stuff rate for the Panthers. Well, the Saints, they were 22.3% of the time they were stuffed in their rushing attempts. That was 28th in the league. Their before contact yards per attempt was 1.1 yards. That was 26th in the league. So their run blocking isn't anything to write home about either. And when they have these running backs that aren't terrific at evading tackles and don't make much happen after contact, we just have to be better at tackling, because we saw those numbers, right? We saw the explosive numbers for us last year. With the emphasis we've made on the run defense, and as you just alluded to, with the outside the tackles number, and with Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Johnson now being the guys on the outside, we need all of that to come to fruition this week. Yep. Because this is literally a litmus test of all of the moves that we made in the offseason. This is almost a perfect team to gauge, did we make some of the right moves? Because their strengths and their proclivities are what we have tried to shore up. So let's see what they could do against our revamped and new look defense.
And there's one other note too, and I think, last year I know I was worried early on just the way the Lions used Jamal Williams in Detroit, and then he came over to New Orleans and you just never saw it. Like, that guy was a touchdown machine in Detroit, and then I don't know if they just didn't use him or he took a step back or just things didn't work out. But I'm curious to see how Kubiak uses Williams in that offense, because I still think that guy has got something to him. I saw him when he played in Green Bay as well, and I thought he had he's got something to him where he can just make plays at any given moment and pop one off, and he's between the tackles he's tough to put down as well. So I'm curious to see how that usage is. But let's move forward, because like you said, I think we're talking way more, but it's good. Like we need to know and understand this team too as well, because we need to have expectations going into this game this Sunday. So let's go to the defense.
And also shout out before I start on this one, shout out Joko in the chat talking about Carr, Baker, Cousins. I'll take Bryce going forward. I love that. I like the sentiment there too. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Says, I think Bryce is the best quarterback in the South by week 6. That's a bold prediction I can get behind. Let's have more of that. You know what I mean? And then asked also, do we know anything about ISM? I know absolutely nothing about ISM. Judging from his reaction to being released, I think that it was relatively surprising to him. I don't anticipate him wanting to continue the relationship here. But no, I know nothing. I don't know if either of you guys do.
No, and I wish, I can't find the full, practice squad team right now. I tried to search it online. I know they were at 13 or 14. They added a couple guys. So I don't know where that's even at as far as that goes. So if anyone knows and wants to throw it in the chat, appreciate it. But yeah,
it's supposed to be on the Panthers.com in the depth chart. It's at the very bottom of it. They're supposed to have the practice squad. But I think as fluid as it is, if they've made a move, it may not be immediately adjusted on the site, but it is on the bottom of the depth chart for them.
I will take a look. Cool.
All right. So for the defense, let's look at it. And again, this is the 2023 defense, likely or for the most part, relatively the same cast of characters. They brought in Kool-Aid McKinstry, the quarterback out of Alabama. Brian Bresee, the second round pick, I believe, out of Clemson last year, is potentially looking at a little bit of an uptick in his role. He doesn't have to, which is a luxury for them, because they do have some players already on that line that they like. Cam Jordan is aging. I think that's a story that we're going to see unfold a little bit this year, because I thought that he looked like he lost some serious juice last year. And that guy has been a menace to this Carolina Panthers team for a good while, man. And I thought last year he did look a little bit like a shell of himself to an extent. I don't want to give, bulletin board material, not that he's probably watching me sit here and wax poetically about his downfall or anything by any stretch. But the last thing you want to do is tell somebody that they're not having it anymore, and then they come out and they shut you the hell up. 19.2 points per game they allowed last year. That was 8th best in the league. We know that we topped that yardage or that measure. 327.3 yards per game. That was 13th best. 207.3 pass yards per game. That was 10th best. So that is their passing defense with Marshawn Lattimore. That is probably their strong point. And they bring in Tyrann Mathieu. They bring in Kool-Aid McKinstry. They have Alontae Taylor, the kid out of Nebraska, that I do think is a pretty decent ball player. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there on that defensive side. But I still think that that's relatively vulnerable for Bryce Young. I think that he can execute this Dave Canales offense and figure out ways to make that work for him. 119, almost 120 yards rushing per game they gave up, though. That was 22nd worst. That's, again, where I think Chuba Hubbard has a real possibility. I like it, man. I think he's got a real possibility of having a good game. You look at all of his individual metrics on a bad offensive team with a poor offensive line, with a unmarried scheme, and then look at coming in this week with this healthy offensive line, even if it's just for 1 week, we've got all of our starters playing, right, on that line. I like Chuba's prospects here. 6 pass yards per play. That was 12th best in the league. 4.4 rush yards per play, 22nd worst. Chuba averaged, right around almost 5-ish, somewhere in that range. I think it was like 4.6, 4.7 last year. So right in that range, if he gets 15 carries, you're looking at a very nice day for Chuba Hubbard. 62 plays a game they allowed on defense. That was 9th. And then 56.2% of the time teams passed against them, which I thought was very interesting. I thought that I anticipated seeing a lower pass percentage with their rush defense, what it was. But then I also remembered they were losing a lot of games too last year, right? Like, this wasn't a world beater team either. So the context of those games is also different.
I'm worried about this defense. I'm not going to lie. The rush stuff I get, but like, they were I think they finished top 10 in total defense last year, and they added. Like, it's not like they lost a lot on defense.
What is your biggest concern for them? They
got Cam Jordan. He's solid, and I know he's aging, and I hate the dude. I do. He's a divisional foe. I don't like him, but I respect his play. He's a damn good player. You add Chase Young to that team. If he stays healthy, that's a concern. You add Willie Gay to the defense, and then those corners, like they have a pretty solid corner room. Kool-Aid McKinstry, that was one guy we talked about. Carolina maybe targeting. He kind of fell in the second round a little bit. That guy had a solid career at Alabama. So I don't know. I just feel like they have pieces here and there at several different spots. And, we don't even I didn't even mention Demario Davis. Like, they have they have a pretty deep defense. I think across the boards, and, they're always tough to play defensively. It always seems like they always have, I think they were, top 10 in, I think it was yards per game and scoring last year as far as defense is concerned. So I don't know. I don't feel like they dropped a lot from last year as far as player wise. And I feel like they've added a couple key pieces as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Saints defense is what is going to carry this team to wins if they, do get a minimal amount or a substantial amount. This defense is what's going to carry them. I really do like their cornerback room. Like Ricky mentioned, Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore, of course, Alontae Taylor, and then adding Kool-Aid McKinstry. They have Tyrann Mathieu. Carl Granderson, a guy on the defensive line who had a really good season last year. I think Pete Warner, a linebacker that we haven't mentioned, that's really good. I love coming out of college.
Yep.
You add Demario Davis and then Willie Gay. I think it's a talented defense. And I don't think it's an easy week 1 matchup for this offense trying to get the ball rolling to getting things together. But, I think it is a good litmus test, like you mentioned, Ricky, and we'll see where they're at. I think they can have their way running the ball, and from all accounts, that's what Canales is going to do. He's going to pound the rock stubbornly. So we'll see if that's the case, and then play action off of it, and hopefully open things up. But I think this team, the Saints on defense at least, it's not going to be an easy one. I don't think the Panthers are running away with it. If they do win, I think it's going to be a ground and pound game, and we'll see what happens.
I think that the youth on the team is probably where my, not skepticism of this defense, but my question for this defense. Because I think that if they're going to continue to be a good defense, Chase Young is a good player when he's healthy, but he's got some effort questions, I think, too. That's been questioned at pretty much everywhere that he's been. His ability, he could take over a game with his physical ability whenever he wants to. So the fact that he doesn't do it more often, I think, is a conversation that a lot of people have about Chase Young. But then when you look at guys like Brian Bresee that I mentioned earlier, but then Isaiah Foskey, Peyton Turner, And then I think it's 6th-round pick, Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa, the interior defensive lineman. I think that they're going to need those guys to perform this season if they want to be a dominant defense. I think they could be an adequate defense, but adequate doesn't necessarily scare anybody. Like, we were an adequate defense last year, right? But teams didn't fear coming in and playing against the Carolina Panthers. Even though we had our strengths and we did some things very well, they knew that we were also vulnerable to certain elements. So when I look at the Saints team, I look at it and say, where they're vulnerable, I think we're powerful. So I think that run offense for the Panthers against the rush defense for the Saints is the matchup that I'm most inclined to say we can really exploit on Sunday.
My biggest concern too, in going to this, is you're going to have Cameron Jordan and Chase Young. One of them is going against Icky.
Yep.
Can Icky hold up against those two guys? Like you said, when Chase Young puts it together, he's a solid edge rusher. Yep. And he has Cameron Jordan, who's a hell of a player, on the other side. So one of those guys is going against Icky. Pick your poison. That concerns the hell out of me.
And I think that Cam Jordan scares me more than Chase Young over there, to be completely honest, because I think that his knowledge of the position in the game and his array of an arsenal is a whole lot more concerning to me, with his fast feet and knowing hand placement and knowing how to bait a tackle like Icky, who his struggle is when he gets off balance and he misses on that initial attack, that initial punch, and his counters are a little bit off. That's where you really get in trouble. So yeah, that is a great point, Curtis, that I think that Cam Jordan could be a problem for Icky if they line him up on that side.
Let's go a little bit deeper here with some of the defensive guys.
So real quickly, 34 sacks for the Saints. That was 28th in the league. If you blow that thing up for me real quick, Curtis, so that I don't pop these eyes out. 31.8% quarterback pressure rate, 28th. And opponents had 2.98 seconds time to throw. That was 31st in the league. So the pass rush for the Saints wasn't anything special to write home about. They bolster that with Chase Young. Having a complementary piece to Cam Jordan, as we were just talking about, I think does help Cam a lot too. And maybe he does have a better year than he had because of the fact that he's not the sole guy, kind of like what Brian Burns experienced a lot here in Carolina. They allowed 61 rushes of 10-plus yards. That was 30th in the league. We've already talked about Chuba and the Panthers number last year, which I only anticipate being better. I also anticipate Miles Sanders getting involved in that. I don't completely count out Raheem Blackshear getting a couple of touches as a little scat back out of the backfield. I think that is also a guy who could surprise people with his involvement. He was held out of so much of camp, but this is a dynamic player from that position until we get Jonathan Brooks back. 1.76 yards before contact allowed. That was 27th in the league. So that's just, I just cannot get over this contrast of their rushing defense and what they allow and what we did well with a mess of a situation last season. I think if we are even relatively cohesive in the ground game, I think that we can really exploit this team and win that time of possession battle, which is huge for a division game season opener on the road. Dennis Allen and his crew of misfits blitzed on 23.9% of the time. That was 18th in the league. And they operated out of a stacked box 18.2% of the time, 14th in the league. Neither of those stats really indicate anything for you, but what it will show you is that Dennis Allen is a relatively aggressive guy. He's going to give you looks of trying to shut down the run, but they couldn't shut down the run. So even if he does try to bring all the personnel there to indicate that they're going to do it, you might just be able to put a hat on a hat and still win. So I would look at Dave Canales and them to say, our strength, their weakness, what do we do here?
Yeah, I'm tired of talking about the Saints, to be honest. Let's cheers, everyone. Get in here, Bryson. Cheers to 400 listeners right now. We appreciate you guys. Drink up. I
feel like we talked about Saints talk. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about the Saints enough. Let's get into. We're gonna put out some bets for you guys in just a little bit, but I just want to talk quickly before we get into that. Some of the injuries, that Dave Canales talked about today. We haven't mentioned yet, but the Panthers have signed Messiah Swinson. I hope I'm saying that right. The tight end from Green Bay off the practice squad for the Packers. I feel like that's a pretty telltale sign that probably Ian Thomas and, Tommy Tremble are not going to be playing week 1. I think I know it hasn't been, official yet, but I feel like that's a pretty telltale sign that, those guys aren't going to be ready to go. And they're just, this is just probably the third guy in that tight end room behind JT and Jordan Matthews. But what do you guys kind of think about these injuries? I know I got a lot to say about it, but where are you guys at with these tight ends?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Start with that. I think the signing indicates, in my opinion, more of a Ian Thomas injury than Trimble, just because the guy they signed is more of a blocking tight end than anything. And I think Canales even mentioned it in his presser. They don't need Messiah, which is a funny name, but they don't need Messiah Swinson to go out there and catch passes. They just need him to go out there and block, essentially. So he's going to be probably the tight end in on 12 personnel blocking for the run or whatever it may be. I think they're going to rely on Sanders, obviously, and Matthews in those pass catching situations. And hopefully Trimble's able to play. It's not looking promising, I'll give you that, but I'm hoping he'll be able to see the field, and maybe they're just taking a smart approach with it and not rushing them back, and I'm okay with that as well. So yeah, I mean, it's frustrating, but I think, we could suffer injuries in other positions where it would be much worse. I'm excited for the possibility of seeing Sanders in a prominent role in week 1.
God damn it. I think I mentioned 80's name. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ricky.
Yeah, you did. Are you sure you don't want to try to atone for that mistake right now by giving your take on this?
Oh, my goodness. Go ahead. I'll jump in
okay.
here in a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I agree pretty much verbatim with what Bryson is talking about, that I think that it speaks more to the injury to 80 Thomas. Can I call him 80 Thomas, or can I call him Ian 80 or something like that? At
80.
least
80's better.
All right, fine. I do think that it speaks more to that for the same reasons that Bryson's talking about, is that he's essentially he's an offensive tackle masquerading as a tight end, right? So you look at him for being the physical point of that position. I still don't even know how much you actually have to anticipate seeing him play, though. I think that in a perfect world, it's going to be JT Sanders, Jordan Matthews, and Tommy Tremble. That's the rotation. I think that if Tommy Tremble experiences a setback and you want to run 12 personnel out there, you might have to have some sort of a blocking threat to execute some of the concepts and keep a defense honest. So
I think
Tremble
plays Sunday.
I do. I think he's trying to. I think that he's trending towards it, and I think that they said that he was in uniform today, right? He just didn't practice.
Yeah, he was off to the sideline, it sounded like.
Right. I think that some of what that is, though, is how Dave Canales has operated with injuries all summer and spring, is that they're not pushing guys to practice necessarily right before game day or in the early portion of an offseason program. I think he's sitting there saying, hey, look, if Tommy felt good, which Tremble did say himself, he expects to play week 1. That's what he said.
Yep.
If he feels that way and he's communicated that with the staff, with the strength and conditioning and with the offensive staff, I think what they're saying is we don't need a setback unless it's in game. Like, we want to get you out there. We want to get you in uniform, put you out, see what you do, give you 4 more days of rest. He can go through the walkthrough on Friday, right? Like, there's no need for him to go through the more laborious practices, the more physical practices. Let him go through the walkthrough. Let him get familiar with the plan. This guy's been here, man. He's a third-year player. He doesn't need the same reps that a Jatavion Sanders does to get ready for his very first NFL game. Also, I think they want Jatavion Sanders to take a prominent role in this offense.
Run with it, please.
I'm reading between the lines here, but he has been far and away the most impressive rookie that we have seen. And Trevin Wallace has been terrific, but Jatavion is filling a position that we don't have. Trevin is a depth piece right now who looks like the future. Jatavion is right now and the future. And it's a big development, I think, for this Carolina Panthers offense, especially when you look at what Dave Canales did with Cade Otton last year. Cade Otton, I mean, just say his name. Like, that guy didn't have anything to write home about. That guy wasn't a threat of a tight end. And he had a pretty productive season in that offense. So I think a guy like Ja'Tavion Sanders, who is clearly more skilled, has a real opening here, man. And Jordan Matthews is terrific for his development too, I think. You heard some of the quotes from Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews, by the way, Alex Zetlow had a terrific article today on Bryce Young and a quote from Jordan Matthews about it where he said something about all the people that doubt Bryce Young. And he says, look, you see a guy at the top of the mountain. He wasn't just dropped off there, right? He climbed it to get there. That's the kind of stuff that when I talked about wanting Jordan Matthews to make the 53, it's for that kind of perspective inside the locker room. This is a dude who has gone through adversity. He's done everything he needs to and worked his ass off to get there. I'm very happy he's there, and I think he'll prove dividends for Ja'Tavion Sanders, Bryce Young, and the rest of those young players in this room. So yeah, I just think that Ja'Tavion is going to get first looks here, and I think the staff wants him to take over.
Well, and that's kind of where I'm at with Tommy Tremble. Why rush him back if, I think he came up now on the injury report. He's got a back injury plus the hamstring. So that was something new that came up within the last week or so. It's like, why rush him back? I'm not very fond of him the way it is. Let's give JT a spot here. Jordan Matthews is performing. You can see the clear connection he had with Bryce Young in the preseason game and in practice if you were in training camp. Let these two guys play. The blocking tight end hasn't worked the last fucking 5 years anyway with 80. Why are we trying to I just don't get it. I get the body. I get the Messiah Swinson signing because you need a third guy if one of those guys goes down. But let's throw these two guys out there and see what they got. Pass catchers. I think there's some, they've developed something with Bryce Young early on. And I agree with you. I thought Jordan Matthews unequivocally should have made this roster from the jump. And I don't know if it was some sort of semantics thing with what they were trying to do. And then, maybe the Tommy Tremble injury was worse than they thought. So then they brought him back. I don't know what it was, but I felt like that guy did whatever he could. And let's not forget, he transitioned to a position. Guy was a wideout, transferred over and, became a tight end and has done very well this offseason. And I like those two guys. I really do. Give those two guys a shot. Let's see what they got. The Tommy Tremble and 80 experience hasn't worked out to this point. I am curious to see what Tremble can do with Canales. I am curious to see that because I do think that guy has potential. It's just inconsistency with he makes one hell of a play, leaps over, hurdles a guy, and then he makes a boneheaded drop in another. So I'm curious to see what he can do with that and what Canales can get out of him. But I'm just tired of the same old shit over and over because we've been waiting for both of these guys to pop off and they just haven't. So give them the opportunity. Let's see what they can do. I know that was probably a long-winded question on of this tight end group, but let's get into some of our bets here because we got some good ones for you all. And I will let Bryson start this off for you guys here. Let me pull this up. Here we go. Fire away, Bryson.
Yeah, so to start with, after we did the deep dive with Ricky into the stats of the Saints defense versus the Panthers offense from last season, maybe I'm rethinking this because I think they're going to run the ball a lot. But, if that's not the case, I think the over on Bryce Young's 200 yards, I think is a pretty safe bet, being that, that we've seen the connection between him and Deontay Johnson. We know that Mingo's made a leap. Adam Thielen is Adam Thielen in this offense. We saw him last season. So I think they are going to run the ball quite a bit probably against the Saints defense that's susceptible to the run, but they're going to play action as well. They're going to take their shots. I think throughout the offseason, Dave Canales has talked about, taking 4 or 5 a game. So if one of those connects, then I think the over on the 200 yards is pretty attainable for Bryce Young against the Saints defense. So the over 200 yards, I would say, is a pretty safe bet moving forward in this game for Bryce Young.
Yeah. All right. Before Ricky goes, I just want to jump in here quick because we've joined a partnership with BetStamp and the North Carolina, I should say, specify that they legally passed sports betting in this state in March. And this is really the first time we as North Carolinians, and if you're listening outside of there, that we've been able to bet on the NFL this season, which is an awesome opportunity. I know I get the numbers all the time. There are millions and millions and millions of dollars made through sports betting through North Carolina already, from the start of March Madness to NBA to MLB to college football that just started. But this is really the first time we've all gotten to legally bet on these NFL games. So it's really exciting time, and we hope everyone takes advantage of that. We do have a designated link. It is our landing page. It's signupexpert.com/Panthers. It's very easy. We do have it in our description on the YouTube page. But you go in there, it shows you all the sports books in your area. It puts them all in one place, so you don't have to, go download the app. You can just have it all in front of you. There is specific, FanDuel is doing something right now. I believe it's you bet $5, you get bonus bets in the 100 plus. There's a lot of different things going on right now to where you can take advantage of that. So we kind of pick different sports books to kind of lay the land for you guys a little bit. And these weren't just dart throws. Like we've tried to look at some of these things, and we think these are some of the picks that we feel confident that we would bet. But yeah, I just think, take advantage of that. And, we have it for you guys, and you can, go sign up there. But Ricky, why don't you, break down what you were thinking for this one?
Well, I think you make a good point there about the sign up expert and what it provides, though, right? Is because I'm looking at this graphic that we have here, and we've got Bet365, we've got FanDuel Sportsbook, and then you have DraftKings Sportsbook all right here. So you've got 3 different areas. But if you just go to that landing page, that signupexpert.com/Panthers, you can open up all of the sports books that are at your disposal. You open them up on different windows, and you can look at every single odds for every single bet that you're looking at, and they all run different promotions. So instead of us just giving you one coupon code for one place, go through all of them. Figure out where you could get free bets. Figure out where you could get bonuses. We've given you a way to do that very simply without confusing yourself, because I'm almost 40 years old and I get confused on the internet. So I've already taken advantage of this landing page. I hope that the rest of you do. Now, if you want my bet to go and look up at all of these beautiful sports books that you can find on signupexpert.com/Panthers, look for over 56.5 rushing yards for Chuba Hubbard. If you really need any detail why, go back and listen to the first 1 hour and 51 minutes of this show, because I've pretty much been waxing poetically the entire time about why I think Chuba Hubbard has a nice game. If Chuba gets 15 to 20 touches, 15 to 20 carries in this game, and he averages 4 to 5 yards, he is going to cruise through that over. You look at their 10-yard plus rushes that they allow, you're talking about 2 of those plus a nice, chewing up the big league chewing up chunk yardage. Let him do his thing out there. I think that that's a bet that can cash. I will be betting it personally. So yeah, if you want to take a chance and roll the dice with me, that's the one that I feel the best about.
I think that Chuba bet is out of all 3 the safest after we've progressed through those deep dive stats that you provided us, Ricky. I mean, man, that bet's looking really good.
There is a method to my madness, even if it includes talking about the opponent a lot. You know what I mean?
And I'm just looking quickly at his stats, if I can find this game log from last year. I mean, the guy, you said 56.5. I mean, I would say majority of his games last year, he was easily over that. And that was with a turnstile offensive line. So,
and not a complimentary passing game. And to Bryson's bet, I did want to give him a little vote of confidence, because we talked about Xavier Legette. Look, if Xavier gets to galloping like his horse Dollar Bill back there in Mullen, South Carolina, if he gets to doing the Dollar Bill impersonation and he goes for 100 and a tutty, all you need is Bryce Young to play complimentary football for the rest of the game, right? Yeah. So I still think that you're in play there too, man. I don't think that's a bad bet at all.
Yeah, I went out on a limb here. I kind of extended it. I wanted a little bit riskier play here. But I just think you cannot deny the connection between Deontay Johnson and Bryce Young. And Deontay Johnson is the Adam Thielen of last year for Bryce. He is the safety blanket for him in his second year. And you saw it in the preseason game. If you went to the training camp, you saw it all the damn time. It was the Bryce Young connection to Diontae Johnson. And I think Diontae Johnson's a hell of a player. And I just pulled his stats from the last 5 games of last year. He hit over 60 yards in 3 of the 5, and that was with Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett. So I think with ease, the only reservation I have with this is if you saw the offense in the preseason game, I mean, they were ripping around to a bunch of guys. But if there's anyone on this team that can get over the 60, I think in that first game, I think without a doubt it's Diontae Johnson. So I'm safe putting that one up. It's obviously plus 120 on DraftKings. But I do think, I mean, I drafted the guy in fantasy. I think he's going to have a hell of a year. It's a contract year. He seems very humbled in this position. He also it seems like has taken on a leadership role in the locker room, both with Bryce Young and these wide receivers. And, we saw his, relationship with JC Horn. I feel like he's really grown and all this, the backlash and all this guy's a cancer to the locker room. I'm not seeing that at all in Charlotte right now. So I do think this guy's going to have a big season. And I'm confident in putting something on him for this week 1 because I do think he's going to have a pretty good game.
Can I say what I like about your bet there with Diontae Johnson? Is based off that Cassidy Hill article, right? The scramble play, the scramble drill, that connection that Bryce and Diontae Johnson have is documented. And we saw it in person, or at least live in action against the Bills, right? On that 4th and 3 play. If there's going to be a chunk play where Bryce is creating outside of the pocket, him and Diontae have a nice connection, man. You might get 40 plus of that yardage right there on one play, 2 or 3 extra passes throughout the game, man. You're hitting that 60.
Exactly. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into our predictions for this week 1 matchup. Who wants to start?
Go for it, Bryson.
Yeah, I'll take it, I guess. So I think I'll start with this. I have no confidence in Derek Carr as a quarterback. I think, like I mentioned earlier in this podcast, he's not going to be the starter halfway through the season for the Saints. I believe they move on quickly from him. And Rattler throughout the preseason has shown some ability, some promise to be a decent quarterback in this league, albeit against 2nd, 3rd, 4th stringers. But I think as soon as Derek Carr throws that first interception, those Saints fans are going to be calling for Rattler to get in the game. So I think the Panthers defense under Evero, we talked about it, is one of the more complicated schemes to play against. Canales has been well documented against coaching against that scheme and how hard it was when he was with the Bucs. I do think the offense is going to be improved. I do think they're going to run the ball a lot. Like I said earlier, I think Ricky's bet for the over on Chuba's rushing yards is a very safe bet. I think the Panthers win this game, and I really don't. I've been thinking that for weeks. I don't see a world where Carolina loses this game. I think the Saints are going to be a much worse team than what people expect. I think the Saints finish last in the NFC South based off of the struggles that Derek Carr is going to have with that offensive line that is not good. They have their issues on 2 of the most important positions on the offensive line, and right tackle and left tackle. I think that the Saints team is going to struggle, and especially in week 1. So I have the Panthers winning the game, and I have them winning 24-17.
I like that. Curtis, you want to go next or you want me to do this?
Go ahead.
Okay. This game reminds me a little bit of week 1 against Atlanta last season, where I think that the national consensus would be the home team in a division rival game gets the win, right? Especially when you look at how bad our offense was last year and that the Saints have added pieces, as Curtis has mentioned, and then they bring in Clint Kubiak to try to fix that anemic offense. But I think that the difference in that game, we could have won that game in Atlanta with a rookie quarterback without the 2 absolute cardinal sins of those interceptions, right? The Jesse Bates interceptions. If you remove even the second one, I think we're still in contention of winning that game. I think that the momentum and the belief that this Carolina Panthers team has in themselves, I think is greater than anything that New Orleans has generating over on their side. From everything I could find from reports, you listen to Chris Olave, where somebody asked him and said, hey, have you seen anything at camp that makes you feel really good about this offense? Like, what have you seen that really tells you like you guys are going to take a step? And he kind of froze and did this thing where he was just like, no, not really. That's crazy. That's a crazy thing for a player to say, that he hasn't seen anything that makes him feel good about his offense. Now, maybe he just meant he didn't see anything exemplary, but hell, if you asked anybody on our team if they saw anything exemplary, you know what they would say? Oh, hell yeah. Bryce Young, Deontay Johnson, Chuba Hubbard, Robert Hunt. I mean, we got some juice right now. I think we go in there, we shove the ball down their throat. I think Chuba goes for 100 and at least one touchdown. I think that Bryce Young gets going in rhythm, plays confidently. And I just think that Evero with a healthy J.C. Horn, because this defense is different when J.C. Horn is healthy. I think seeing this team, Jordan Fuller, I think is going to have an impact. The new safety that we brought in for the Rams. I anticipate seeing us win this game 26-17.
Bryson, did you give a score?
Yep, I had 24-17 Panthers.
Okay.
I
Well,
wanted
I'll
to
say
go
this.
24-17, but Bryson stole it.
I'll say this. I think what we saw in the preseason was exactly what we wanted to see. An efficient offense with Bryce Young moving down the field against the Bills. And we were salivating for it. We wanted to see that from what we saw last year in this vanilla, ragtag bouncing between playbooks, Frank Reich and Thomas Brown, then Frank Reich and then Thomas Brown. I mean, it was just a disaster from the get-go. What I'm worried about is Bryce Young doesn't make that fourth down play in that Bills preseason game. We might be talking about a different story a little bit down on what we did offensively in that, game. And it could have been a second series for Bryce. I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid too much on that game. And I'm worried a lot of folks are. And I don't mean to be the negative one, but I'm keeping my expectations low for this season, and I'm going to be consistent with that. I do think the Saints defense, I think they are better than what they were last year and what the pieces they added. And the unknown of Kubiak scares me, the young pass game coordinator from San Fran. And Kamara's playing on a contract year. I mean, he's going to put it all out there. I think Carolina's hope is this, I feel like is a patchwork offensive line for the Saints. They lost Ramczyk, which is a really big piece to this O-line. I believe they lost another guy in free agency as well. And, Ricky has mentioned before, they drafted a guy who's mainly played right tackle. He shifted to left. I just think this team, I think it's going to take a couple games for them to really get going. And for me to confidently say, this team is, ready to roll and ready to beat anyone. I just think it's going to take a little bit, and just seeing how long it kind of took Tampa Bay to really get rolling with Canales last year. I think it's going to be a typical NFC South matchup, lower scoring, a very tight game. I'm just the whole, the atmosphere of New Orleans as well. It's always hard to play there in the Superdome. So I hate to do this, but I'm going to go probably the Saints on this one. I'll go 23-17. The Saints win this game. And I really hope I'm wrong. I do. I want to be proven wrong. I want this team to dominate. I want Canales to be the right coach. But I just need to see more from this team to confidently say, all right, they're ready to roll and beat a team in the division week 1 on the road. And I'm not ready to do that yet. But I do think it's going to be a competitive game. And, hopefully we're all celebrating on Sunday and they get the win.
Yeah,
So.
I love that. maybe for me too, one of the things that Bryson, I don't know if you feel this way since we both took the Panthers to win. I don't think this team knows any better than to think they shouldn't come out and win this game. I think that this is a team that doesn't have any internal expectations because this team has been deliberate from the coaching down about not putting expectations. So I think they come out and they say, why can't we win? Like, what's the actual reasoning that we shouldn't go in here and win? And I think that's a dangerous team when everyone around you thinks you should lose, but nobody within the team feels like you should lose. I think that's a very dangerous combination. So I'm just hopeful that they come out and completely buck what everybody thinks about a slow start and having to gel. I just hope that Bryce Young is the guy, man, and we get to see it.
Yeah.
One kind of way to go ahead, Bryson.
Well, I was just going to mention I agree with Ricky's sentiment, and the easy part of the schedule for Carolina is the first half of the schedule. The second half of the schedule is brutal, going in week 9 and on. So if they're going to get wins, it's going to be the first half of the schedule. They cannot afford to start slow, and I'm hoping that this coaching staff realizes that, and I believe they do. And I think while the team might not go in with expectations of we're supposed to lose this game or we're supposed to win this game, I think that they have the overall sentiment of this is one of the games that if we're going to win, we're going to win. And I think that this team realizes that, and I believe this game and then the one in Carolina when the Saints come to Charlotte are both winnable games for this team.
One thing to counteract and kind of side with you guys a little bit is I think, and Ricky kind of mentioned this, playing Atlanta last year I think is beneficial on the road for week 1. Bryce Young kind of knows the expectations now. I think it would have – I get it. There's obviously some home field there, but really is there a home field advantage in Charlotte? I mean, let's be real there. So I think there is a benefit to playing on the road against Atlanta last year in his rookie season. He knows, this is where our hotel is. We're getting on the bus. This is like he knows that routine, and that's like a whole thing when you're a rookie. So I think that is going to help him. I just don't know if I can get over the concerns that this O-line together has not played a snap together. Like Damian, the entire starting offense line has not played one game snap. Austin Corbett has not played a real game at center. And we don't have an answer at the opposite of Clowney with, I feel like, is a worse edge room than we had last year behind Brian Burns. And then we also have a cornerback room besides J.C. Horn that has not played together at all in games, has had very minimal practice. And I know we can, it's great. Evero's a great coordinator, but can these guys really bring it together when it counts and mesh well? And is there going to be communication errors and lineups and all like that all plays into, and that just concerns me. And I think it's going to be too overwhelming for them to, overcome at the end of the day. But again, we'll see what happens this weekend, and man, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. So, Ricky,
you what, man? Anybody, people ever invite you to parties, man? Like holy shit! No, I'm joking with you. I totally understand what you're saying, and we'll have to just kind of wait and see. I will say the thing about the home field advantage. I heard that the Saints are selling tickets for this game for $8, so maybe that environment isn't as boisterous as it once was, because of the Derek Carr effect and the Dennis Allen effect.
Why aren't we going there?
Yeah, I'm just saying there's still time, isn't there? Like we can catch a Ron Rivera. That's a riverboat, and we could head on down to the bayou and go have us a little fun. No, but look, I want to say as the first episode that we've had here, I want to say thank you guys very much for bringing me on again into the team. This is awesome, man. If this is the dynamic of it, Bryson and I are going to have a terrific season. And Curtis, you'll eventually catch up to us. You'll drink enough of the Kool-Aid. We'll slow down that bandwagon so that you climb on board, because the Panthers are leaving the station on Sunday, and I am looking for them to go ahead and cover that bandwagon with the very first W, the first of a handful this season. So great episode. I'm out of whiskey. I'm out of beer. So you guys, if you have anything else that you want to say, I think that I've talked enough on this episode.
Well, I just want to say we are thrilled to have you a part of the team. And I think we are going to create amazing content for all the 480 listeners out there that are tuning in. We really do appreciate
y'all
it.
Listening.
At 11:11, make a wish. And I'll be wishing that the Panthers win on Sunday. But
I wish Curtis wasn't so fucking negative.
Curtis was hurt last year, man. He was
I
hurt
understand.
bad.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I am. I'm usually, literally, ask Bryson. I'm usually the positive one. Bryson's
Yeah.
usually the negative one. We flipped. Like, I'm tired of getting burned, and
We'll get you back there, man. I look at this as kind of like, you remember that Freddie Prinze Jr. movie, She's All That? Like, you're Rachel Lee Cook. Like, you've got a really beautiful thing inside there somewhere. Freddie Prinze just has to dress you up, man. Put a full beat on that face. We'll get you pretty again. Don't worry, Curtis.
All right. I appreciate that. But we appreciate everyone for tuning in again. Keep the comments coming when we are, back. I don't know what we're going to be doing for our next episode. We haven't talked yet. Maybe something after the game. We'll talk after this. But we definitely will be back for sure next Wednesday for you guys. So we just appreciate, again, we do have our landing page. If you are interested in sports betting, go check it out. signupexpert.com/Panthers. And you get all of these sports books in your area to sign up. It's very easy. It's all in one place. You don't have to go outside of there. Go check it out online. We would appreciate it. And thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. And, of course, keep pounding, and we will see you all next week.